All right, good afternoon, everybody, and we're so happy that you could join us. The General Assembly seems like it is a long way away, but believe it or not, gosh, it'll be here right after the holidays. That's how Tanner and I guess are looking at it. We're so happy that you joined us today. Just a very few housekeeping items. We're going to try today, we're in webinar mode, which means that you can hear us and we can't hear you. It's not that we don't love hearing from you, it's just it's easier to manage 150 people that way. But the way that you ask questions is we ask that you put them in the Q&A function, not the chat function. And this time, for the first time, at least when Tanner and I have hosted a webinar, we're going to do something called upvote. So if you go into the Q&A box and you see that somebody has asked a question that is really similar to what you were about ready to ask, you can upvote that question and it'll just bring it to the top of the queue. You know, it's like a popularity contest for questions. So encourage you to do that. Makes us really focus in on the things that people are most interested in knowing about. All right, so we are recording this in case you want to go back and listen to it at a later date. Really appreciate everybody being here today. So let me, guess I should introduce myself. So I'm Ann Jersick. I'm the Director of Outreach and Advocacy in the state of Virginia. And today our speaker is Tanner Council. Tanner, I've been so fortunate to work with Tanner over the past 10 years. He's our grassroots manager from the Hampton Roads area of Hampton Roads. And gosh, Tanner, he's a UVA grad and we don't hold that against him. He was an anthropology major. All those Virginia Tech grads, you may not hold that against him. But he was an anthropology major, and after that he went and he was with the Ravenna Conservation, what is now the Alliance. He was the society, and you know, has been doing water quality advocacy and really helping to empower you know, our volunteers and make them comfortable and prepare them to be effective advocates. So we're so glad that you joined us today, because I think there's a lot of takeaways in this presentation that'll be helpful. So Tanner, with that, I will kick it off to you.
Thank you, Ann. And I would just echo that I've been very fortunate to work with Ann for the last 10 years. It's been quite a decade, and I think that this webinar is a lot of what we have learned as a team and as an organization, and a lot of feedback that we've gotten from the volunteers and the citizen advocates, the citizen lobbyists that we've worked with. So today, I think that I'll just outline kind of the goals for the presentation. We want to instill in this the importance of advocacy, or citizen lobbying, as it may be referred to, take away some of the stigma surrounding lobbying in general and citizen lobbying specifically, and really instill some confidence to go out there and take on some of these techniques and tools that we're going to discuss today. This is really something that everyone can do and everyone should do. And I'll tell you, if everybody was a little more familiar with these techniques, we'd have a much more robust conversation among and between our elected officials, and ideally a lot more success and compromise and a healthier dialogue all around. For the purposes of this for this presentation, we're going to focus on the Virginia General Assembly, and we're doing that for two reasons. Number one, the Virginia General Assembly, the way that they pass bills and that the structure is very similar to what happens at the federal level. But mainly because the techniques and tools that we're going to discuss here may be used up at the federal level and also down to the local level, which is incredibly important. And number two, as Ann mentioned, the Virginia General Assembly session is right around the corner. So we want to kind of get this fresh in people's minds and give them really the opportunity is about to be right there to start employing these techniques. So let's get on with it. This just a little bit about where I'm coming from. Before Ann mentioned that I worked for Ravenna Conservation Society before, and I was doing a lot of kind of programming, but I really didn't understand the power of citizen advocacy until I started working for CBF. I think I, held on to some of that general apathy that we see in the population. What does one vote matter? What does, one phone call matter? What is one letter going to really do? And what we've seen at CBF time and time again throughout the year, and especially during General Assembly session, is that a few strategically timed phone calls, letters, emails can make a huge difference. It can be all the difference between whether a Bay-friendly bill or funding package passes or fails. And that's really where the rubber meets the road. So we're going to talk about those techniques, and I just really want to impress upon you that this is not just, this stuff really matters. This stuff really counts. And when you're involved in pushing a piece of legislation forward, when you win, it feels fantastic. So that's the name of the game, get involved. So this is a fairly humorous kind of take on what people think of lobbyists. I travel a lot. I was in Colorado recently. And somebody asked me what I did. And I said, well, I'm a registered lobbyist. And I kind of did that just to see what their reaction would be. And 9 times out of 10, you don't get the most positive response. But lobbying is, especially citizen lobbying, it's the act of persuasion, if not the art of persuasion, of affecting the opinions, the actions, and ultimately the votes of an elected official. And as you can see, society looks at it lots of different ways, but I'm here to show you that I think that some of these may not be accurate, but certainly the one at the bottom right is maybe the one at the bottom left are the ones that I really identify with. Just going forward here. And I would would like to mention that lobbyists are always mostly part of the constituency. They may be very involved with the issue, a paid lobbyist, for example, but a citizen lobbyist is almost always part of the constituency, meaning they live in the district of the representative they're speaking to. And to encourage you, in many cases, as we're going to point this out, in a lot of ways, as someone that's very passionate and familiar with issues around natural resources, in many cases, you'll be more informed than they are on these issues. And that's what they need to hear. They need to hear from their people. So step one, who are your legislators? Anna's going to drop the link here in the chat. Because of the constrictions of time today, I'm not going to be able to click through all these links, but I really hope that you will click on that link as Ann drops it in, leave it up on your screen, and keep those screens open. Go explore them later. But the first and foremost is, who are your legislators? And when you go through this, you just enter your address, and they're going to tell you this particular site will tell you everybody from state level on up. So knowing who your elected officials are is incredibly important. And when you get that link, you'll also have a link to their email and a link to their phone number. I'd print it out and have it on my fridge. I happen to have mine saved to my phone. But so when an issue comes up, you can pick up and you can make that call or shoot that email, and we're going to talk more about how easy that is as we go through the presentation. So these are the people that we're talking about. These are your elected officials. Starting at your local, we'll start at the federal. You have your 2 U.S. senators, and then in your congressional district, you have 1 in the House. They also have their appointees and their secretaries and their staff that are often the kind of the front lines. State, very similar. You have a House of Delegates, which is analogous to the House of Representatives. You have the Senate, and then you have your governor, and then all their appointees and secretaries. Down to the local, you've got if you're in a city or a town, you've got a mayor and a city or town council. And if you're in a county, you have a board of supervisors and their appointees and all their county staff as well. So it's very important to kind of know who these people are. These are the folks that represent you, and these are the folks that need to hear from you on issues that you care about. So I love this slide. This is what the General Assembly is like sometimes. It's a wild ride. Everybody's kind of walking around like very professional, but underneath it's like a duck underwater. They're just paddling, looking very calm on the surface. The Virginia General Assembly session, as it says here, even long sessions are short. So in even years, we've got a 60-day session that's just 2 months. As it will be this upcoming year, it's a 45-day session. In those 45 days, last year, for example, over 3,000 substantive bills were introduced in the General Assembly. I mean, that is just an incredible volume of ideas and proposals, and reading material is really what it comes down to. And you can see that, how some were passed and some were passed unanimously, and a lot of them are just kind of tabled or killed or consolidated or passed on for the next year. But this is really where kind of we can help, is stepping forward and helping to lift up certain legislation or funding packages. And it means so much when you can communicate to your elected official they say, well, I wasn't so sure about this, but so-and-so from my district feels very strongly about this. And you get a few extra voices on that, and it really starts to matter. The last bullet point there, 47% of members have 4 years of experience or less. And that just all goes back to the point that some of you may have been working on these issues for decades. So your expertise and your passion on these issues is very, very important. Another kind of analogy for the General Assembly is the life-size game of whack-a-mole. So you've got thousands of bills popping up, and in some cases, there are bills that pop up that could be very bad, that you may want to kind of beat back. Now, ideally, in that last bullet, you want to be proactive. You want to know what's coming up, and you want to be promoting that legislation, those ideas in advance. But every once in a while, we'll get a wacky idea. Let's say we're going to fill in wetlands, or we want to get rid of the wetlands boards altogether in some cases. And that's where what we have what's called a fire drill at CBF. Everybody kind of stops what they're doing, and we go to beat back or whack them all. And that's not how we like to spend our time. We want to spend our time being proactive and building up legislation and pushing forward really progressive ideas for the Bay. As I've pointed out here, there's only 5 CBF staff fully engaged in the General Assembly. Now, there's other of us that are up there on a semi-regular basis, but we only got about 5 people that are there all the time, and we're well known there, and we're well received there. But that's a lot of ground to cover when you get back to those 3,000 bills and 140 electeds up there in the General Assembly. So our secret weapon is the 70,000 plus CBF members that we have in Virginia, the folks that are on this call right now. You all are really what makes it happen for us. I will be just really blunt. When CBF walks into the room, into an office, they know what we're going to say. They know that we're going to be fighting tooth and nail for bay-friendly or water quality legislation. We get paid for it, just to be blunt. They know that. But when they see their constituent walking down the hallway towards their office and stepping into their door, it carries so much more credibility. And a lot of us don't live in those districts, so we really are just kind of lobbyists at that point. But you all as citizen lobbyists, it means so much more, and we'll get to that. And I say walk down the hall, but this could be a phone call, an email, or something else, and we're going to talk about that. So this just goes back to a little bit more of a breakdown of the bicameral houses that we have in Virginia. We've got a House of Delegates and a Virginia, and then the Senate. Each one of them has a number of standing committees, but there's 2 in each that we really focus on, and most of the Bay affecting legislation rolls through these 2 committees. On the House side, you've got Agriculture, Chesapeake, and Natural Resources. We call that House Ag. And on the Senate side, very similar, Agriculture, Conservation, and Natural Resources. We call that Senate Ag. On back to the House, Appropriations. And on the Senate side, they call it Finance. We call those the money committees. Okay, these are where you've got legislative initiatives and funding initiatives, and these both come into play every single year. And most of our legislation that we care about falls into one of these 2, or one of these 4. I'm sorry. So this is a little bit of remedial civics. I'm not going to tire you with every single step of the way, especially because of constrictions of time. But what I really want to point out here is, and Anne, can you see my cursor moving around here? I'm going to assume yes. So
yes,
you have over here on either side of the House, a senator or a delegate has an idea for a bill. Usually it comes from a constituent, or maybe it's something in their own wheelhouse, that is sent to the Division of Legislative Services and requested to be drafted into a bill. The bill is assigned by the patron, introduced, and printed. At that point, the bill is going to be assigned to the appropriate committee. And right here, you've got, there are a number of subcommittees that go into either one of these main committees. This is really important. So this is where the first opportunity you have amendments, substitutes, you have the fiscal impact. You also have an opportunity to speak. This is the first time the public can go in and speak on behalf of some of this legislation. This is where these subcommittees is where a lot of bills don't really make it out of that subcommittee. They may get kicked out. They may flop, but typically they go back, they're changed, they come back again the next year, and they're fine-tuned and have another shot at it. But as I mentioned, this is a very high-speed process. Things are just moving through. So, and when you have 3,000 bills, it's not really how many bills can you get passed, it's how many can you shoot down, just in the name of triage. So this is a really important step. If it is reported out that it goes down to the full floor, and it may or may not pass. This here is very important. So about halfway through session, so we're talking late January, usually early February, we have what's called crossover. So everything that passed the Senate now goes to the House to repeat the process, and vice versa. For this reason, by the time that this happens, that's why we focus most of our advocacy work in that first half, because by the time it gets over here, if it is passed through the Senate or the House, it normally has a better chance of making it all the way through. There is still a lot of advocacy that goes forward, and we do want to, we send van loads of people to go up to make sure that happens. But this is just all to illustrate how quick the timing is, and how important timing is in general, as you're trying to push bills through. Another thing, if a bill is introduced, if you have identical or very, very closely related bills that are introduced on the House and the Senate side, they have a much better chance of going through their respective chambers and then going back out and being approved, because they've already looked at those proposals. So at CBF, if we're going to introduce legislation, we're going to seek out a patron in both the House and the Senate to give it the best shots of going through. And then the buck stops here. After being passed by both houses of the General Assembly, the bill is sent to the governor for his or her approval in April. After being signed by the governor, the bill will become law effective the first day of July, following adjournment of the regular session. There are cases where we will advocate for amendments, because there can be amendments here, there could be vetoes here, or it could be signed. So, but this is just kind of the final stop for legislation in general.
Tanner?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to stop you because I think we've got a question that's really relevant to where you are right now. Glenda Booth is asking, is there one, a written or other record of subcommittee and committee deliberations? And two, is there a committee report expressing the intent and history of a bill?
Can you repeat the first question? I didn't quite get that.
Yeah, is there a written or other record of subcommittee and committee deliberations? Is the first question.
So the subcommittee meetings are not recorded, to my knowledge. Yeah, so you've really kind of got to be there. You will, if there are changes and amendments made, you will be able to see them, but the actual conversations and deliberations that go on in those meeting rooms are not recorded.
Okay, there's another question that's sort of similar, which is there a committee report expressing the intent and history of the bill? And I'll just say that is generally there is not a committee report unless it's a committee that's been pulled together, at the speaker's request, right?
But you can go to generalassembly.gov and sort of track all the changes in history of the bill as it's been through
every amendment. Yep.
In a single session. Yes.
So Glenda, I hope that answered your question. She also, this is a sort of similar question regarding process, but she asked, please explain the ways that the legislators can handle a bill other than reporting it out. So in addition to reporting it out, they can postpone it. They can pass it by indefinitely, which is a nice way of saying, hey, it's killed for this year, but perhaps it can come back next year. That's really a nice way of quote laying it on the table, which means that they're not going to take it up. It's not going to get out of committee this year.
Yeah, exactly. It's a nice way of doing that.
And then, and now while I've got you interrupted, let me just do one more. So Kate Walker asked, she says HB 533 was passed and signed, but it has a reenactment clause. Do we need to advocate to get it passed this year? And the answer to that is yes. It's got a reenactment clause on it. It means that it has to come up the following year. So I'll stop there.
So going into, now that we know a little bit about the process and kind of when and we want to interject in that process. This is just the kind of quick bulleted guide to how effective, how to make advocacy effective. First and foremost, it should be personal. Facts and figures are great. They are what kind of get us to the second point, of which is being accurate. But most importantly, people, legislators, are just like everybody else. They don't walk away remembering how many pounds of nitrogen a certain practice is going to remove. They want to know why you're there. First of all, what is your personal connection, to this issue? There's a link here that Ann will drop into EPA to know your waterways. For example, why do you care about clean water? Well, the lake or the stream or the river or the actual estuary that I live on is polluted for X, Y, and Z. You can go to this link here that Ann's dropping and learn a lot about your personal waterway from that scientific standpoint, maybe confirm some suspicions you may have had. But most importantly, having a personal story, what brought you there? For me, I grew up fishing with my dad on waterways, and over time, I have seen them go down and I've seen them sort of come back up, and I don't want to lose that trajectory. I remember not being able to eat rockfish at Thanksgiving, and now I want, you see this population that's somewhat starting to rebound. You have to make it your own, but that's what will stick with people. That's what will also help them remember you. This is all about building relationships and building some familiarity. So having that personal story sort of in your back pocket, ready to go, is extremely important. Being accurate, yes, you want those facts to be based on science, be based in reality, and you want them to apply to a particular or relevant issue. So if you can, also in terms of accuracy, always reference the specific bill number. If you say, I'm here about the oyster bill, there's 5 or 6 oyster bills every single year. So you want to be really specific about that, be very, very, in order to be accurate and to have your message go through cleanly. Be concise. I really can't emphasize the importance of this. These guys, the legislators are looking at 3,000 bills a year. They don't have a whole lot of time, not to mention everything else that they have to do. Keeping things short and sweet goes a really long way. They really do appreciate it. If they want to keep you in the room or on the phone to talk, they will. They certainly will. But typically, a 10-minute meeting with your legislator, whether that's on phone, in person, in district, or at the Capitol, is a long meeting. So be ready for that. And of course, be polite. Really shouldn't have to say this, but elected officials are badgered and harangued for a lot of reasons all year long, and it really goes a long way just to be cordial in these interactions, and that includes with your written words as well. Really can't emphasize that enough. So before we get into this, these are some things to keep in mind. I'm about to go through a whole bunch of different practices. Some of those practices are not going to be as relevant this session, but this presentation, we want to give you tools that are evergreen, but they might be a little bit brown this year because of all the craziness at the General in general. But it will be the same way at the General Assembly. Advocacy is still going to be incredibly important. That is not going to change. We still need voices, maybe more than ever, to support legislation to help us move Bay-friendly bills and funding. This is because there's going to be a major shortfall in the traditional advocacy products that we have. Typically this time of year, Ann and I would have already, or our colleagues would have gone out to fairs and festivals and recruited stacks and stacks and letters, hundreds if not thousands of letters, postcards, photographs, all sorts of stuff that we use in the General Assembly to sort of be more persuasive. We don't have that. There's a major gap this year, so I can't really emphasize how important it's going to be making those phone calls, setting up Zoom meetings, etc. That's what I say by major opportunity to fill the void. Those in-person meetings are going to be out. I think that there's probably a chance in some cases, depending on your legislator, maybe meet in district. You might be able to set up a coffee or some other sort of very socially distanced meeting. But in general, I would prepare for meetings kind of like this to be ready for Zoom and to squeeze in 10 minutes with your elected online. And phone calls. Phone calls are one of the great, we're going to talk more about them, but just pick up the phone. It's very, very quick. Even if it's just to leave a voicemail, we'll talk about that. Your phone calls are going to be incredibly important. We hope to see a lot more of those than we have in the past in this particular scenario this year. Social media, we're going to talk about that and the kind of pitfalls there and the benefits, but this is going to be really important too. it seems there's on social media a lot more these days because of staying home and everything else. So use this to our advantage. It's a way to really project your voice. And then what else? I mean, I'm asking for ideas. We're all looking for ideas on how to be more creative and how to advocate for certain issues in lieu of in-person meetings and other sort of gatherings and travel that we're not able to do this year. So I'm not going to go through this entire list. Maybe take a screen grab of this, or Ann, we can send this around in our follow-up email. But just these are some of the things that we will be working on this year, and there are things that we work on pretty much every year. When it comes to budget, we're looking for funding for agricultural best management practices and technical expertise to reduce runoff from farms. We're looking for this money for the Stormwater Local Assistance Fund, which is a competitive matching program that cities, localities can apply for, and they can get 50% match for large-scale projects to reduce pollution going into waterways, with a preference for Chesapeake Bay tributaries. An oyster stock assessment, which has never been done in Virginia. Wastewater treatment plant upgrades, which are huge for meeting our pollution reduction goals. It's one of the kind of the spigots that we can ratchet down pollution, but it costs money to be able to upgrade those the technology that they use at those wastewater treatment plants. Environmental education for the students, in-field environmental education. We need to keep that money on the books for the kids and the future conservationists of Virginia. And then sufficient staffing, and then for DCR, DEQ, and Director of Environmental Justice for DEQ, which is a new one that's going to be incredibly important, and it's a very important first step to start righting some of the wrongs here in Virginia. Tree preservation, one of Ann's favorite topics and pet projects every single year in the General Assembly. We're going to have another webinar on this. I'm not sure if Ann has the link for that yet, but there's going to be a follow-up webinar about our ambitions for tree preservation across Virginia. So I like this slide a lot. This kind of shows you the spectrum of efficacy, okay? What are you going to spend your time on? As you will see, on the less effective side, not saying not effective, but on the less effective side, you're going to see generally it takes a little bit less time to do this than it does as you kind of go down the line. And we're going to walk through each of these in the time that we have. The wild card is social media. Social media can be something that takes 2 seconds to do, or it can be something that you craft really well. And depending on how you do it and what the issue is and who you're targeting, it could be incredibly, it could really take off, or it could fall on deaf ears. It all depends on how you do it. And it kind of goes back to that whole thing of being personal, accurate, concise, and polite. I cannot emphasize polite enough on social media. We need more of it. So the petition, I love this analogy as a Scrabble player. This looks like a very impressive play, but if you look a little closer, it has actually very few points. A petition is something that takes 2 seconds to do. You sign your name, it's off. Your name goes into a group of thousands of others in some cases. It's typically people that are looking at those realize that it didn't take much to do that, and it didn't take much to persuade you to do something so simple. So you won't see a lot of petitions at CBF. That's not saying we will never do them, but the petition itself is something that is just on the easier scale and is not weighed as heavily among legislators. Going on up, one thing you will see a lot at CBF are these form letters, and these we are able to target these to legislators. When you see one of these, please do pay attention to fill them out, because they're often targeted to you because you are in an important district. You may be in one of those committees, that the Senate Ag or House Appropriations. You may be in one of those special committees, so please do look at those emails. They're important. But once you do, just take a minute to change a little bit. Personalize it. Change it as little or as much as you possibly can. But in some cases, they will look at the same form email and say, especially when it comes to public comments on the regulatory side, they'll say, well, we got 500 comments exactly the same, and they'll count it as one comment. So mixing it up and changing things can really go a long way. Put your own voice into it. I never just click through a form email like this. I will always add a couple of personal items in here. I'm your constituent. I've planted over 100 trees in the 4th district since 2005. Thank you for your leadership. There's that polite part. These are the form letters. These are something that you'll see that will be filled out in person, and they do have a little bit more weight. in general, because you are able to add comments over here. You're able to personalize it in that way. But you know that they know that at some point, two people were meeting and discussing in person. Okay, it wasn't just something online that they clicked through while they were, having lunch. This constitutes what could be a very meaningful interaction, and the person that signed this has been made aware of this issue, and the legislator is now aware of that. This is just an example. There's Ann down here at the governor's office dropping off a literal boatload of letters. There's a canoe here that you can't see. There's a literal boatload of letters that we dropped off, and that was very effective at the time. Phone calls. This one is so easy, and I have people tell me all the time, I don't want to talk to my senator. They get nervous. Here's the deal: you're not going to talk to your senator or your delegate. I mean, 99% of the time, unless their staff is out sick, they're not going to pick up the phone. This is going to be this quick. Hello, my name is Tanner Council. I live at 4650, yada, yada, and I support HB 3332. Okay, that's it. That's all it has to be. If you don't want to talk to anybody, call after 5 or 6 o'clock and leave a voicemail. They check them in the morning and they're just tallying up yay, nay, yay, nay. That's how they do it. So really, this is the secret. I mean, this is such a secret weapon that I wish more people knew about. And that's why I keep mine on speed dial. Perfect for introverts. Here's the letters and email. So believe it or not, we do hear that old-fashioned letters kind of go a long way. There are some concerns, especially at the federal level, sending letters up. Letters are scanned and often held back. So it's not the most timely thing to do if you're trying to push a specific piece of legislation. But a good introductory letter is very nice. They love to see these handwritten letters. And also a thank you letter is something as well. That's something that's not really as timely. But an email could take the place of this these days. They may even appreciate that more. A well-worded email, person to person, can really go a long way. For those of you that are writers, this is a great way. Stay off the phone and craft your message, and it cannot be misconstrued. It's right there on paper. Letters to the editor. This is a big one. This has the potential to reach thousands of people. So an article comes out in the paper. Sometimes it may be an editorial from the staff themselves at the paper. Luckily, here in Virginia, we have very sympathetic editors at a lot of our papers in terms of natural resources. So that's where you hop online and you go to their website, respond. It's 250 words or less typically. That's very, very short. CBF is always here to help you. We can give you some bullets. We can proof it for you. There are, in some cases with our clean water captains, they know very well, there's some articles that we just can't ignore. Like somebody has to say something. And as I said before, it means a lot more coming from a constituent than it does from paid CBF staff. So we may solicit a response to some of these. But this broadcasts in a huge way, and our legislators are reading those papers. And they're certainly scanning for their names. So if you mention them by name in some cases in a very polite way or an accurate way, it will certainly get their attention. The next one, and I just want to mention, if you do get published, you're never guaranteed to get published, but if you do, it's a great feeling. You get a couple text messages from some friends, you see your name in lights or in print. It's a good feeling. And again, since our editors are quite sympathetic to the Bay and other related issues, we frequently see them published. That's a big one, but this is probably the end all be all, is meeting with your elected official in person. And this is the type of thing where this is the big hump. This is the big threshold that we kind of find people trying to get them over. You can meet with them in district, which is like right now is a great time to meet. Again, COVID, but just this time of year is a great time to meet before they go into session. All of our elected officials pretty much have full-time jobs, and they do that as civic duty and go up to Richmond for a month and a half or 2 months a year. But getting a time to meet with them either in district, which is in where you live, or at the Capitol is a wonderful way to make that connection. When you go there, and I will go into all the ins and outs of this, let me just put it this way. It is a lot easier and more joyous than you might imagine. Our volunteers walk out and they're in ties and they're nervous when they walk in. And when they walk out, they're like, that was easy. That was great. And they really had a good conversation with the elected. When you go, you're going to want to have some materials to leave behind, maybe some photographs. You're going to tell them your personal story and tell them why you came all the way to Richmond, or you came all the way to meet them at the coffee shop or their district office. And they're going to understand that you care about this and be able to put a face to the name, which they love and will, in some cases, turn and use for their own storytelling. Let's see here. I just want to make sure I don't miss anything, because we're not going to be doing this year, but every year people know that I will take a van up from Hampton Roads. We'll go up there. We'll be back before rush hour to get this done. But we make a fun day out of it. But you can go on your own anytime. This year, it's going to be all about setting up those Zoom meetings, which is something you're going to be hearing more from us about going down the line. And then this is the big thing. So they go in and they're ready to meet their elected. Well, I don't know, and they're acting like they're nervous, like it's a job interview. It is a job interview for them. What you're going to find is that they're very polite. They're going to listen, but what they're trying to do also is impress you. Can you imagine that you go all the way to Richmond, you come back and you say, Senator so-and-so was a real jerk to me, or Senator so-and-so dismissed my idea, and how bad that would be for his political future or his credibility at that time? They're trying to impress you, and we are the ones that put them in office. So think about it in terms of a job interview for them, that you're actually in some ways, you don't need to be nervous for these. You really don't. And again, 9 times out of 10, people walk out and they say, that was great. Some people say it was fun, and they come back again and again. These are very charismatic people as well. They don't get elected by just being bumps on a log. They're really enjoyable people to talk to in many cases. So the wild card, social media. We have a whole advocacy toolkit that we can give some more details about this, but there's no really one way to do social media. But I guess what I have here on the side are some ways to start. Follow your legislators. So you've gone to generalassembly.gov. You've looked up who your electeds are. Now you can go find them on Facebook and just follow them. You'll see what they're saying, where they stand on certain issues, and you'll start to see the things that they care about. You may even start to see sort of a personal side to them. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram are the most popular. I'm not going to send you onto TikTok or any of these other crazy, or Snapchat or any of these other crazy forums that are popping up. These are the most popular. These are the ones that our legislators are usually on. You can post your thoughts, your photos, articles related to our natural resources. The articles that we put out all the time are really good to kind of share, to share or retweet, and then use a hashtag, Save the Bay, and tag your representatives. We love using the hashtag Save the Bay because we can see what's going on there, but also it is, after 53 years, this is a universal phrase that everybody sort of recognizes. It's that bumper sticker phenomenon that we've gotten, that kind of cachet with the expression. So it makes it clear what you're talking about right there, and we're partial to it because we can kind of keep an eye on it. Tag your representatives. That's where you're putting them sort of on blast. They or their staff will see that if you tag them in there. And then if you tag us at Chesapeake Bay, it also, again, that kind of helps us know where the action is and who's interested and where the issues are going. We just love to see that sort of public discourse. We love to see the direct interaction of our legislators. And again, accurate, polite, concise. Right here at the bottom, Anne can drop these in for you so that you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. And that is just to say, I'm not trying to get us more followers, but you will see good content that you can share with them. It's a good way to start a dialogue. This social media is going to be more important than ever this year, I'll say that. And I encourage you, if you don't even have a Facebook account, good. Set it up just to follow your legislators and only go on there for that. You don't even have to talk to friends and family, because in some ways, we understand that people don't want to be online, but it is a really effective advocacy tool. And then this is the thank you. Just whatever you do, I mean, this is a kind of a universal thing, but when you go meet with somebody, when you hear back from somebody, just tell them thank you. They don't hear a whole lot of thank yous, our legislators. They tell us this all the time. So typically at CBF, if we don't have necessarily like a hard ask, we will do a hard thank you. We'll start sending thank yous out to people because they are, like I said, they are hanged and asked every which way for something to be done. And when it is done, they don't have the same sort of response on the other side, if you follow me. You've got 1,000 people telling you to do something, then you do it, and then you hear back from 5 people. Really makes you wonder why you did it sometimes. Just a thank you goes a long way. Just leave it at that. So really quickly, these won't be happening as much this year, but we will be looking for sort of out of the box ideas, especially right here, the pop-up oyster roast that we did. This is really just kind of an off the wall way to get attention for an important issue. But we are out in the field with our elected officials all the time. We get them out into the water, into a project. We get them on our turf. They see what's going on firsthand. And we will typically invite like clean water captains, for example, who are in district to come out there and be a part of some of those as well. I'm going to try to move quickly here. So in some of your best practices, I've kind of outlined here another good kind of screen grab. But at the end of the day, it is about building relationships. A couple of phone calls, a couple of emails, and you're starting to get some name recognition within that office. And again, the more accurate, concise, and polite you are, the more they're going to listen to you or even look forward to your comments. They're going to look to see what you're doing as you're one person that's speaking. You're not the 200,000 people in your locality, but they're looking at you as a representative of that side of an argument. So the more they start to listen to you, the more they're going to start to think that other people are thinking this way as well. Craft your story, know what you're going to say. I didn't do a great job of explaining my story this morning, but if I were, I'd be able to explain why I'm there, where I'm coming from, and why I care in about 45 seconds or less. You want to know what you want to accomplish when you go in the door. It shouldn't be a meandering conversation. You have your pleasantries. You say, I'm here to talk about XYZ. Your timing is critical, and earlier the better. And all these, earlier the better, that you can get as soon as you have a bill number, sometimes even before on an issue, start getting those communications in. You want to focus on the reps making those initial decisions. That goes back to those committees and subcommittees that I spoke about. Being succinct, I think I've said it 100 times already, being succinct or concise. And don't assume the elected knows everything. You're going to want to provide some quick background, because if you start blasting through your argument and they didn't catch, step one, they might just sit there and politely nod until they're trying to catch up with you. So provide a little bit of background. Like I said, a fact sheet, a photo, an article, something that you can leave with them as a memento reminder, especially if you don't meet with the elected, it's him or herself. Leaving something with staff so that they have something to hand over and it's not just a verbal report. Dress for success. Nobody needs to go in wearing a 3-piece suit, but this is a very professional environment and you want to look the part. And anybody can underdress, is what they say. So go in there and look the part and be open to compromise. And I could spend an entire webinar talking about this, but just being heard on one side, hearing what the other side has to say, that's half the battle right there. And know that a lot of legislation does not move through on the first year. That it's either passed by, or it's amended, or it's slowly cobbled together, or there's a consensus that's built over years to get that to pass. There are some links here that you can use. The CBF Take Action, that's our Action Alert Network. That's where we're going to send you. If you're not on that, please be on that. And we'll drop that in the links. These are the ways to stay informed. But people ask me all the time, what's the #1 way to save the bay? Should I be an oyster gardener? Should I go plant some trees? My answer is just be informed. Know what's going on in your locality, in your state, at a watershed scale if you can. But just knowing what's going on, being familiar with the issues, is going to position you to make a big difference depending on what you decide to do, and especially for advocacy. So important just to know what's going on, to be able to speak to it from the heart. Local engagement. These are things that are all opportunities for citizens. You can join. You can join the Wetlands Board through a nomination process. Go to Planning Commission, PDC meetings, Planning District Commission meetings. There's a whole litany of things that you can do here, but a lot of them are very local. And when I say lead by example, you don't need to go out there and yell at your neighbor for blowing leaves in the drain, but just really do it on your property. And maybe when, make it known that you're doing it. I don't know. That's just an example I came up with because at my dad's boat club, they saw me kind of raking something out before the storm came. They're like, why are you doing that? You know, and the reason I'm doing that is because I don't want that to go back into the waterway when the flood comes. They kind of sat on the porch looking at me like I was crazy. Like, we've never done that. That's, you know, the water's going to come get it. Mark my words, the very next storm that came through, I went over and saw guys over there raking it out themselves. I didn't tell them what to do. I just did it. And now it's something that they do all the time. So lead by example on your own property, in your own life, goes a long way too. You might not know who you're influencing, but in many ways you are. I'm just going to touch on the federal. Federal is a whole nother animal in many ways. They're up there pretty much all year, making changes, passing legislation, granting funding, etc. These are just some of the things that we work on year round. We are looking for people to be more involved at the federal level. If you can do it at the state level, you can definitely do it at the federal level. That's what kind of prepares you for it. And our contact here, Katie Morgan, is our counterpart in DC. So I encourage you to reach out to her. And I'm going to go really quickly on these in the name of time. Our clean water captains, these are volunteers that come to us that say they want to be more involved with the stuff that we've been talking about here today. We are heavily invested in this group of volunteers. We have them all over the state. We have them actually all over the watershed. And we are always looking for new, fresh blood in the program. And you've got a lot of support there from us, but also from your fellow clean water captains. And it's not all just, you know, boring presentations like these or, you know, driving up to Richmond, which is actually very fun. We do all sorts of fun stuff as well. We have social gatherings and we get together and have amazing seafood, but we're always learning and talking and discussing. There's a lot of fellowship that goes on there. So if this sort of stuff interests you, we would love for you to check out the program. And I think Ann's going to drop a link to that as well. There's some videos you can watch, some live videos of some of our retreats that we have every year. These are your takeaways, another great screen grab. Even a few phone calls or letters can swing a vote. And if CBF calls on you at a certain time, please know that we're not doing this. We're only doing this to pass legislation, especially in January and February and early March. If you see an email from us, it's probably very important. We have plenty of staff that are there to raise money for CBF and all that. That's not what Ann and myself and our colleagues are doing. We're there to get volunteers and to get communications into these decision makers. They need to hear from you, especially when they're voting across the party line. They need to have a good reason. When they come back from lunch and they're about to go in to vote, and they say, how many phone calls did we get? Well, 5 phone calls just came in that said you should vote for this. Gonna make them think. The more time you put into your message or that advocacy product, the more you're going to get back, or the more it's going to weigh. The best advocates don't happen overnight, but the best time to get involved is now. And look at that spectrum and things that you can do and kind of push yourself up that spectrum or leapfrog to the very end. The Virginia General Assembly is key. It is that whole game of whack-a-mole, that organized chaos. That's where we really, really need your involvement. That's the high stakes that are happening every winter here in Virginia. And then, of course, year-round, you want to stay informed on issues. My challenge to all of you is to identify your elected officials if you don't already know them, and send them an email, send them punch in a phone call, maybe do a Facebook post or an Instagram post or something. My challenge is for you to do one of the things that we talked about today, and then let us know that you did it. I just would love to know that we've got somebody that's willing to take that first step. And I know that many of you I've seen on the call have taken that first step. I challenge you to do it again today, especially pre-session. Let them know that you're there, that you're watching, and you wish them well. They just had the special session over the summer. They're probably exhausted and they're looking down the barrel after the holidays of another a General Assembly session. Send them your gratitude and your thanks for their leadership and everything that they're doing in there. And at the end of the day, it's not going to be CBF that saves the Bay. It's not. If the Bay glistens and we meet our goals in 2025 for the blueprint, for example, and we're ready to pop champagne, we're not going to pop it for ourselves. We'll be popping it for you all, because this is a huge social movement, and we are just there as agents trying to get people to send those communications in and get the political will and the funding to get it done, because we know how to get it done, but we need those decision makers on our side to finish the job. And with that, I will conclude and take any questions that you have.
Excellent. Thank you, Tanner. Yeah, we've got some great questions. So I'm going to, some of these have been up for a while, and a lot of them I've answered,
Thank you.
in text. But I love Cindy's question, which is, does repetition work? If I write the same letter every day, does that amplify my voice or cause my representative to ignore me? I love this.
Okay, well, what if somebody sent you the same message every single day? How would you feel about them? And you just got to think about it. Now, there's a couple of, these are human beings. They're going to be different. So they may handle it differently. They may decide to address it head on, they may ignore it. But I would say that a consistent drumbeat for an issue is very important. How repetitive you make it. If you're not hearing back from them, I might try to take a different tack. Don't give up on it necessarily, but if you're doing the same thing over and over and not getting the same and getting the same result, right? What do they say about that? So I think that we certainly, and I guess it kind of depends on the issue too, but no, I would go ahead and just say that probably sending the same message over and over again is, if you're not hearing back, is not the most effective way to communicate that message to the decision maker.
So Bill Fleming, who is a clean water captain, asked, and I'm happy to take this one if you'd like, if a captain has an idea about a bill, is CBF interested in looking at it and possibly finding sponsors?
So we take on, as we have explained ad nauseum at this point, we're spread really thin, just like the elected officials up there. We're swimming in a ton of legislation. We have our priorities that are sort of evergreen year to year. But every year we do look and we have these conversations among our primary lobby team that, what should be our pet project? What should be the bill that we really want to put out? It's not always just one, but in the name of triage, we kind of start there. What should be the project? So to that end, yes, if you have an idea for it, please send it to us. We'd love to hear about it. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that. We have, again, in the name of triage, we can't work every single issue we want to. And if you could see these meetings that we have to, we have to grade a bill, either high priority, low priority, or no priority. And it's a dagger for some of us, because we all have our personal passions, and some things are really important, but sometimes we have to rely on our partners, of which we have many, to take on bills as well. So think that, but yes, please, if you have an idea, please send it over.
Yeah, that's a great question, Bill. Gosh, I hope I'm not butchering your name. Yesriel Cook asked, could you please show the write a letter slide again? If you could go backwards and show that one. And while you're finding that, Jack Jordan asked,
this slide, I'm sorry. This is the letter email. It's just funny. It's just a funny joke. But I mean, I'm not sure if that's the one, but there's also, I'll leave this up for a second, then I'll go to another one. What was the other question?
So yeah, the other question was from Jack Jordan, what do you do to support Chesapeake Bay boards?
So which boards are you referring to?
The Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act boards,
yeah.
The local boards.
Yeah, so so we, first of all, one of the ways that we try to support them is we look for opportunities to fill spaces on those boards. So in many cases, our clean water captains will sit on those boards. We don't have, and in some cases, we will protect the necessity and credibility of those boards if they're ever at risk of coming off in a particular locality. But in many cases, we aren't able to attend every single one of those meetings. We do ask our captains to sort of be our eyes and ears. And those are held in private, and it's what we would encourage is for people to either sit on those boards or go attend those board meetings. Because again, we can't be at every single one of them.
Thank you. Nicole asked, is there a Maryland Clean Water Captains group?
There certainly is. Yeah. So, and I believe is Anna Mudd is amudd at AMUDD at cbf.org is going to be your contact there. And they have a robust program up there as well.
Yeah, just typed, just sent that.
We'd love to hear from you. Please give her a call.
Yeah, I'll just, so Karen Harrison is a legislative aide, and she offers this. She says, as an aide, we always appreciate when advocates clearly state their position on specific bills. In other words, I support this or I oppose this.
Right.
And whether they're speaking for an organization or as a constituent or both. So an example is if you've gotten all of your homeowners association to agree that this group of 400 homeowners supports this piece of legislation, then you're the president of that HOA, you could write a letter that says, I'm speaking on behalf of my 400 fellow homeowners, as an example. And then she finishes up with personal stories help us advocate for your position. So she's just sort of re-emphasizing and amplifying what you were saying, Tanner, about how important those stories are.
Thank you.
So Kristen says, hey, this webinar has been great. Will it be available somewhere online afterwards so I can share it with other people who'd be interested? And the answer to that is yes. We're recording it as we speak. And it's generally available on the CBF webinar, or cbf.org/webinars on our website, generally 2 to 3 days after the live event. We get it posted up on the website. So yes, absolutely, you can share that link with anybody. I think that's it. There's only there's one more question from Glenda Booth that says, which action can legislators take to continue a bill to the next session? Technically, are all bills, quote, alive during the entire 2-year session? That is, can they be brought up again?
Yes.
Yeah, it depends on what the action is, right? If they're passed by indefinitely, they're PBI'd, then the bill has to be brought up with a new number, during the following session. So they can be killed, but what's the other one? They can be passed by indefinitely, and they can be passed by for the day. Right, so that could be postponed just for the day, or it could be passed by for the week, and that means that generally the legislators and stakeholders have got some issue they want to iron out, and they need a little bit of extra time, and so it'll become clear during a committee meeting that, hey, this isn't quite ready for prime time, so that PBI for the week or pass by for the week gives them just a little bit more time to sort of smooth out the edges of the language.
But the idea that a bill that was passed by indefinitely or killed or can come back the following year, even in identical form, absolutely, and that is the case. Normally, I'd be very interested to know what the average for a natural resource bill, how many times it goes through General Assembly. But it normally doesn't pass on the first time, the second time, or even the third time. It can take several sessions to get something through.
Yeah, that's a great example. The fertilizer legislation that we worked on had been brought up 3 consecutive years before it got out of subcommittee. Once it got out of subcommittee, it sailed through both the House and the Senate. So sometimes the timing just has to be right. So Tina, it looks like we've just got 1 more minute. We don't have any more questions. Just want to thank everybody again for sticking with us. I'll just mention the 2 upcoming webinars that we've got. The one that is going to be November 18th will be about trees, and it'll sort of say what the state of tree legislation is currently, and then the value and the benefits that they have for air and water quality and stress reduction and all the other benefits that they provide. And then our December webinar will be Peggy Sanner. She's the CBF Executive Director for the Virginia office. And she will do a deep dive into our General Assembly ask for the 2021 session. So that one slide that Tanner had that said, these are all the money things that we're asking for, and then it just had 1 bullet for tree legislation. That'll be completely fleshed out and will be its own presentation. It'll run 30 to 40 minutes, just like this one did. So thank you very much again for joining us. Tanner, thank you. You're awesome. And I look forward to seeing you guys on a future webinar.
I would put one more plug in for Clean Water Captains program if you want to get involved with us. And another one, if you have creative ideas on COVID safe ideas on how to advocate with our electeds this year, we will want to hear them. And so again, thank you.
Excellent. All right. Thanks all. Take care.